For those who don't know me, I'm Hilary Gosher. I lead Insight Onsite. So Insight Onsite is a team of 130 operators, software operators and consultants who work very closely with our portfolio companies, helping them realize the dream. We invest in scale-ups from seed stage to late stage, and our on-site team and our centers of excellence help those companies scale up, which means we're on the ground. We're literally on site with portfolio companies where we can be. And hence, the predictions that you're about to hear are very much lived experience. My colleagues are thinking daily with our portfolio companies about the emerging trends that we're going to share with you. And so I'm delighted to introduce to you Hilary Headley and Richard Scrow, both of whom are in our Sales and Customer Success Center of Excellence, and Meg Fitzgerald, who is part of our Marketing Center of Excellence. And so we have 4 predictions that we will share with you today. I'll go through them briefly. The first is ad hoc AI, and I say ad hoc AI will put you at a major disadvantage. Nice controversial thing to get us started. Secondly, ROI will be the AOTY, the acronym of the year for 2025, specifically in go-to-market scaling. Thirdly, human excellence will become even more important than it has been prior to this. And finally, the workforce will be resourced across an engagement spectrum, which is a little an enigma that we'll leave as a dangling thread until we reach it in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to start with Hilary Headley, my namesake. So there's 2 Hillarys on this call. And so Hilary, lobbing it to you first. Ad hoc AI will put companies at a major disadvantage. But before we discuss what that is, potentially let's set the table. What does AI adoption look like today, and where might it be going?
Yeah, thanks. On one hand, that's a really easy question because we know that AI adoption is going to continue and it's only going to be increasing. On the other hand, that's a really tricky question because AI is here, there, and everywhere. And we know that folks are talking about it and managing it and really trying to get it implemented across their organization. If you think about if AI is being used everywhere, we have 500 portfolio companies under management. If you do a Google search and you're hiding maybe your AI response, congratulations, you're also using AI. If you're talking to Claude or you're using ChatGPT, you're jumping into that generative space. We're seeing that same item happen in 2024, which was that year of experimentation, where we saw from users to companies doing some ad hoc or kind of one-off tasks that they look to do, all the way up to top-down organizational change and experimentation. What we really think we're going to see in 2025, though, is that late majority moving in with their AI, Gen AI, and predictive AI use, and at a level that is more top-down from the organization versus single users making sure that they can sound great when they jump on a webinar or when they're going to talk to their manager. So there's a couple things driving that, which is in 2024 in that experimentation phase. We could see some of those notes of productivity coming through. And there are companies saying, we want to have more of that. We want to continue to be improving both our growth and our efficiency. And we're seeing it occur in some of the major tools in go-to-market. Salesforce, HubSpot, Marketo, you name them, they're all infusing more AI and Gen AI so that they can also see those lifts in productivity. I think a big question, though, that we've been asking ourselves and that we get asked by our portfolio companies is how do you go and do this in a governance model? And so I think Meg's got the insights on that one. So I'll pass it up to have her tackle that.
Great. So yes, Meg, I mean, as Hilary was talking about, we think ad hoc will put people at a disadvantage. So what do we mean by AI governance?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And as Hillary pointed out, like adoption, governance varies widely across the portfolio. And this is really the how behind AI. It's not a question around when, it's not a question around if or even why, but how. We're all going to implement AI. And the how you govern does demand intention and strategic thinking. We're seeing 2 key governance approaches emerge in the portfolio. The first is a decentralized approach, and this is probably the more common approach. This shows up as teams or even individuals automating tasks and workflows within their functions. The responsibility of AI in this case is spread across many stakeholders. And don't get me wrong, this approach is bottoms up and it is most definitely driving efficiency. It is automating content flows. It is even automating entire SDR workflows. It's flexible, but the thing I'll underline is that the value is incremental. The second approach is a centralized approach. And this is where we're seeing that transformational impact. The centralized approach starts from the top. It requires the CEO to prioritize AI, be intentional around it, and really align with the executive leadership team around how AI drives impact to your specific organization's core business metrics. There's one unifying body governing that execution. There's a really amazing example within the portfolio of a company that actually built an agent and fed that agent a whole bunch of organizational wisdom. That agent is then able to go talk to specialized agents that are experts in key elements of the organization's go-to-market. So there's an agent for each region, there's an agent for each segment that this company is targeting. And in this multi-agent model, governance is inherently woven into the company's DNA, and it's you can see the transformation. It is much deeper, it is sustainable. While it may take a bit longer to deploy, it's not just that incremental gain. So, whether you're starting from scratch or you're rebooting the way you're thinking about AI and your strategy here, my advice is to start and get started now, but be intentional around it and think about working back from the future. This is something that you talk a lot about, Hillary. I think it's really important to think through and visualize how AI impacts your core unit economics and your financial metrics from the top. Align from the top around what you want that deeper change to look like across your people, across your processes, across your programs, and execute from there. And I know Rich also has lots to say around how governance may differ between different stages of growth and where you are from a maturity level.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, Meg, because we invest from early stage seed type of investing, Series A, all the way to late stage investing. Richard, would it be safe to assume, or could we assume that the later stage companies are doing something more governance structure, more process driven, more top down, more centralized, and the earlier stage companies are being more ad hoc? Or do we see it the other way around? Or is there really no rhyme or reason? It really just depends on the CEO and the leadership team.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I wish I had a very concise answer, but the short answer is it depends. What we see across many of our early stage companies, they're lean, there's minimal entrenched processes in place, there's minimal formal governance, and there's not really large teams. This is all hands on deck to bring on every customer and make that customer super duper successful. AI is part of the substrate of these organizations. It's part of the strategy from the start because of that leanness. And those small, flat teams enable very quick experimentation, iteration, and adoption, which gives them, in some instances, a competitive edge versus some larger incumbents. I think as companies scale, they start to establish processes, there's teams that are successful, and it creates some organizational inertia. There's probably two contrasting approaches that we see in larger organizations. The centrally driven kind of progressive organization where AI is enfranchised from the top as a strategic differentiator. And those folks, by and large, try to keep pace with that same pace of early stage company innovation. It's constant experimentation and iteration. It's part of the fabric of the organization. There's another group that might be a little bit more conservative, decentralized, kind of bottoms up. It's more methodical and measured in adoption of AI, and it's more what I would call evolutionarily as opposed to revolutionary. One common trend that we see, though, in all of these larger organizations, these later stage organizations, they may have years of messy or misaligned data that requires some cleanup and alignment on shared taxonomy before they can truly leverage the power of AI. And if we look at these approaches, I think early stage companies, right, rapid experimentation and innovation is the name of the game. For later stage, it's really is a balance between some of this fast-paced innovation and intentional structured approaches to AI adoption. So a very long way to say it depends a little bit on where the organization as an individual organization is.
Yeah. And, since our contention and the prediction that we're making is that if you're ad hoc, you are going to be at a disadvantage because you're not systemic, you're not process driven, you're not thinking about change management. So and then as we move to agentic, which is the next wave that, our colleagues talked about in the predictions from December when we talked about tech predictions, what foundational elements need to be in place in order to integrate Gen AI, not just AI, but Gen AI and then agentic. So, Harry, that's a slight, next phase or nuance on this.
Yeah. It's a great question. It's a tough one, and I'm seeing some good ones come in about LLMs and architecture, and that's not necessarily where we're going to go today. In this one, I'm going to take a step back. There's a common cliche that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And in 2025, we agree with that, but we're almost making a twist and saying it's really culture and strategy eat technology for breakfast, because the bottom line is you're not going to get very far without a strong strategy and culture in place to make sure that this happens. Not only are we being asked at times, how can we make sure that our processes, our systems, our data are ready? We are being asked as much, how can we get our people ready? There's companies that fear a little bit of this, or the folks, I should say, within the company, where they're maybe a little allergic to what's happening with the shifts in AI. We want to move them to adopting and really being advocates for what that is. But as a leader, it's your responsibility or their responsibility to be weaving that into the culture. At a CEO mindset that we had, this was a really top table item that was being discussed of how CEOs are weaving this into not only their OKRs, but what they do in every town hall, how they run their team meetings, what they're doing in their day-to-day discussions with folks, so that it's not just something that's being said, but something that really is being kind of led top down. One, I think, kind of great way to think about strategy and culture and doing that before the technology. There's some fun tools out there, and we don't want to talk too much about specific tools, but if you think about the days, I'm an ex-operator in RevOps, where you had to do territory management. This could take you months to get ready, hours to do, and you only could do it one time a year because it was such a heavy lift. Now there's dynamic territory routing if you don't have a quality or quantity of activity to make sure that the best sellers have what they need to do. What that unlocks then in your strategy and how you want to go to market is incredible, and something that we haven't seen before. That's one use case. There are so many others that we're seeing, but understanding not only that you need to have a strategy and a culture and a plan to do that, and that this can feed up, is another way of saying great communication around what needs to be happening is going to be important. There are end users at your company, or just employees at your company that are using this in a way that you maybe never thought of before, that you need to be listening to, and you need to be supporting that through a cultural change that allows them, if they are in a fear-based state, to go from being allergic or afraid of it to adopting and really advocating what that might mean for their internal work, and also what that could look like for their customers and prospects in that area.
That makes sense. You started to allude to some sales and marketing workflows. So you mentioned territory management, which is a huge sales workflow. RevOps people spend a lot of time thinking about territory management. So as we think about more sales and marketing workflows being automated, what's the human in the loop? Do human roles evolve? Do human roles go away? I know this is a question that many folks have talked about. So Meg, a perspective there?
Absolutely. So I'll take a step back first and paint the picture that marketing is an early adopter here, and there's good reason for that. Tech has been embedded in marketing for 2+ decades. It's not just CRM. Marketers have been using marketing automation platforms, analytics software, account-based tools, you name it. Tech is part of the modern marketer's DNA, which I believe has made the transition to integrating AI a bit more seamless. As a result, we're really starting to see three, and it was hard to boil it down to three, but three top use cases emerge within the marketing landscape that are starting to drive some tangible impact. Those three are, no surprise, content, SEO, and campaign creation. And I'll go into some quick examples because they're pretty compelling on each of those. So on the content side, and this is probably the most common use case, I'm sure we're all leveraging AI to create content in our day-to-day lives. One portfolio company used some of the visual imagery and creative AI tools out there to create thousands of creative assets, so banners, images, in the time that it took to make just one before AI. And the best part about it is that there were higher conversion rates, so overnight higher conversion rates on their AI generated landing pages versus those that were non-AI generated. So that was instant ROI. On the SEO front, one company that we work with tripled ROI within 10 months, which is a very short time period to triple ROI, by using AI to laser focus their content and keyword strategy. They basically ingested all of the competitor and market data out there. They told AI about SEO best practices, and AI told them, here's the content, here's the keywords you need to focus on. Not only did this lead to higher first page rankings, but the really cool part is that it also reduced this company's reliance on pay-per-click. So they got a stronger digital footprint and they had instant cost savings, which is pretty spectacular. On the campaigns front, which is really where we pull it all together, there's another company that had, as we see it every day, very aggressive growth targets. And the company decided that their strategy to attack these growth targets was to drive localized campaigns in each of the markets that they operated. The company gave AI tools to the field marketers in each of these markets and basically shifted the field marketer's role from tactician to strategist. So the field marketers had full control over the campaigns and the campaign creation in their specific territories, and the result was phenomenal. It actually 10x'd the campaign output, and the company exceeded their goals for the year. As you can see, the common thread here is ROI, it's efficiency, and specific to the marketing front, it's really shifting the marketer from production to strategist and innovator.
Rich, can the same thing be said in sales?
I think there's a lot of scenarios that we could unpack from sales. Hillary Headley mentioned the territory design. I'm going to go more foundational. If I could see all the folks in attendance here, how many folks say the CRM is our source of truth? A lot of folks. I'm sure I get a lot of head nodding on that. And spoiler alert, if you are fanatical about keeping your CRM up to date, the best companies in the world may be 50% accurate 12 months after a record is put into place. Just think about that for a second. What kind of impact does 50% accurate data have on your ability to design territories and make data-driven decisions? It really impacts things. Now imagine automatically you can have confidence that your CRM is 95% up to date. That's the world that we live in today. There are tools that can go out, scrape your team's calendar, scrape their inbox to ensure all the leads and contact information is correct. You can layer in account level automation, automatically pulling in key information about the account, what they've done in their trial, who their key users is, what profiles, ideal customer profiles and value drivers match to them. And your system becomes more and more reflective of the current reality of your business and of your pipeline. And many folks have started using conversational intelligence and forecasting tools. Those are kind of table stakes for the last era of sales tech. That provides an additional level of insight on the health of an individual opportunity or account. Put all of that together, and you've got a better ability to forecast and understand how your pipeline is progressing. So what does that actually mean? It means fewer outdated records. It's better pipeline quality, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it means higher sales throughput. Your reps day in and day out will be working more highly qualified opportunities. It changes what they have to do with those. But CRM automation is kind of table stakes and where I see many companies get started on their AI and automation journey because it is such an important data set to have accurate.
100% makes sense. You know, Meg, I just want to double click a little bit about what you were talking about, because there's some acronyms that I think are worth just unpacking on the marketing side. You know, we've moved from traditional SEO, you know, the original Google is traditional SEO, to SGE, to now GEO. You know, and so you alluded a little bit to the change in campaigns, the change in conversion rates, but maybe you could just unpack a little what we mean by SGE and now GEO.
Absolutely. And it is a bit of acronym soup. But newsflash for everyone, a new marketing channel is here. And yes, it's another acronym. Generative Engine Optimization, GEO, at its core is a tactic that allows go-to-market leaders to influence how their brand is showing up in LLM responses. So let's rewind a year. 2024 kicked off a search revolution. We pushed beyond the traditional SEO, just going straight to Google, into generative search land. That was just 12 months ago. And this shift is moving unbelievably quickly. The numbers are showing it. So we're seeing that 60% of searches now end without a click. So this zero search click world is really, really starting to come alive. With that, user behavior is shifting. So more folks are turning to AI for research versus just going straight to Google. And because of these two things, paid search is in complete flux. So what does that mean for 2025? In 2025, we really need to think more carefully and rethink how buyers are discovering our products. This is the year that we have to straddle both sides of the fence. We have to continue to drive our best practices in traditional SEO, and we have to stay on the bleeding edge of all things generative. And while traditional search today still drives a huge portion of marketing source pipeline, generative is rapidly gaining ground. As you can see, there's a lot here, and every single day brings something new in this landscape. We could probably do an entire webinar on this topic, but my parting advice is to stay on top of this. It's very fast moving. And most importantly, ensure you understand your buyer and show up where your buyer shows up. That's always the most important thing.
Yeah. You know, we've talked now around this top-down governance. Ad hoc AI doesn't make sense. At the same time, the market's moving very quickly and there's a need to respond. And so within all of this, I think we have had 2 years of experimentation, let's say, with AI. You know, was launched, you know, almost 2 years, 2 months or 3 months ago. And so the last 2 years, 23, 24, it was this ad hoc. We're now starting to say top-down governance, a common approach, common processes, change management, that's going to really make the difference between the winners and losers in AI. But at the same time, we haven't yet reached a point, in my opinion, where we've really proven the ROI of a lot of these AI investments that our companies are making. And so it's a big question, which is how do you measure ROI? And so, Deanna, if you'll flash up our next prediction, which is this will be the year, or ROI will be the acronym of the year, AOTY, another acronym, the acronym of the year for AI. And so, you know, Hillary or Meg, where do we just do, you were talking eloquently there. How should you measure, you know, ROI when it comes to AI?
Yeah, so it's a big question, and as a marketer, I always think about target audiences and personas. So my advice is to keep 3 audiences top of mind, and those 3 audiences are your board, we are investors, your internal teams, and certainly not least your customers. So let's dive into your board. The advice here when you're thinking about ROI is really to work with your CFO and align the go-to-market metrics and the go-to-market impact that you're driving with AI to the core unit economics of your business. This is something that as go-to-market leaders, we probably don't do enough of. And I think with the proliferation of AI, it's more important now than ever. The other piece of advice is, as a go-to-market leader, it will be even more important to elevate your thinking to that business owner mindset. So thinking more like your CEO, like your founder. The second audience is your internal teams, and having a very clear plan around validating the investment in AI is not optional. It will be required. Budgets are still tight, and ensuring that you're aligned and setting clear hypotheses around how you will bring AI in and how that AI will impact those core business levers is going to be critical. And the third audience is your customers. So your customers today, more than ever, are looking for near-term ROI. Again, as I said, budgets are tight. So do everything you can to make it easy for them. Help them justify that investing in your product, and this can be through case studies, this can be through third-party validation, but help them justify in the sales cycle that investing in your product is going to drive ROI for their bottom line. Now, let's get to the how. Measuring impact of AI is actually quite simple, and sometimes I think we overcomplicate it. Look at pre-AI, ensure you got a timestamp there, and then look at post-AI and understand what that difference is. And of course, I'm oversimplifying it, but being methodical about pre and post and ensuring that your workflows and you're designing your hypothesis clearly to articulate that will be very, very important. The second piece of guidance is leveraging the rule of framework. So focus less on click-through rates and website traffic, focus more on profitability and growth. Think about how everything that you're doing in the go-to-market is moving levers like cost of customer acquisition, like net retention rate, gross margin. It's going to be incredibly important as we get into 2025 because experimentation and click-through rates are not going to cut it anymore. I'll just level set really quickly on what we're seeing today in terms of impact. Today, we really are seeing impact more in that efficiency bucket. We're seeing lots of productivity gains, no surprisingly, and those productivity gains are impacting CAC. Again, 2025 will be the year where we bring that efficiency measure and the growth measure together, right? And so on that growth side, it'll be important to think through how AI is providing a TAM unlock. And this is a really interesting concept, but simple at its core. Because of AI, you are now able to both service and obtain more of your total addressable market. This is a really big deal, right? Very, very exciting. If you think about how to action that, think about an account-based motion, right? The power of AI plus account-based marketing is equivalent to personalization at uber scale. You now have the tools truly to target your entire universe. It's not just devoting resources to your tier 1 segment or your tier 1 accounts. You're now able to devote the same level of resources and use the power of AI to multiply and target a much bigger piece of the pie. So I think those are some really exciting levers to keep in mind as you're thinking about ROI heading into 2025.
Meg, you mentioned on that score many times budget. So, what's the investment? What's the budget allocation to AI? And so I do want to ask, Hillary, if we think about budgets from a board level, and when I think about the CFO's role, when I'm a board member, it's really around capital allocation decisions, making sure that, I'm making the highest investment possible in terms of where I place capital. That's the CEO, the board, the CFO's role. So when I think about capital allocation decisions and budget to AI, how should I be thinking about it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hillary. We have talked a lot about go-to-market and budgeting, and it is still the do more with less. It's an annoying kind of adage or cliche that's out there, but we also know that it's not just a quantity play. It's really about kind of a quantity item, if you will. What we mean by that is it's not just reducing or removing headcount. It feels cold to say that that's the only way to be looking at how go-to-market teams should be thinking about budget. So we wanted to give a framework example of how you might be able to be looking at your budgeting for go-to-market, not just before you maybe have rolled out or roll out your fiscal year here come February 1st, but throughout the year. So there's 4 ways that you can be taking a look at it, or questions that you can kind of ask yourself in actions. What can we just remove entirely? What can we reduce? Where can we consolidate, and where can we invest across kind of 3 key areas of people, tech, and programs? And an example in tech is if you actually take an inventory of the tools that you use, you'll find even our early stage or mid-stage companies, they have 30 to 100 items in their tech stack. So they are really looking at tracking this much more closely, because there's going to be some wins in there. And really with our CFOs, they're going to have to find some wins in there of what they can remove or reduce, or really put together a program that's going to leverage that in a better way. So in tech, we see that. In people, it's not just a pure headcount, but maybe what are some of the responsibilities that exist there, which can be consolidated or moved, or maybe put through a programmatic area, and then invested in if that's going to be the way to do it. And then lastly, with programs. I think a great example that we have within the portfolio, we have a company that supports around 50 to 60 sellers, and there is not an enablement person there today. That is because the marketing team has been able to build out a pure kind of AI opportunity for them to go in and search on the use cases, craft emails. They've done it where you can call a phone and a partner can understand how to get smart quick on a company they're going to sell to. So there are entire companies that maybe aren't building first with people to come in to do it, but to see the information that they have to enable their partners and their sellers. Now, at some point, they're going to need to expand that and maybe hire in some additional folks to do that. But we're seeing really creative ways to maybe reduce in other areas and then double down in that investment for scale. And so again, that's just a fast framework that we encourage folks to be taking a look at if you haven't, as a go-to-market leader, and challenge yourself and your team, and that you can be looking at throughout the year of where you can continue to see maybe some consolidations of items so you can continue to invest in those really key areas that hopefully are creative and fun and innovative, and start to put those humans even more in the forefront in the right spots for that. I think Rich had a great point about some sales tech he was pinging me on. So Rich, can I kick it back to you and see if you want to share that example?
Yeah, of course, and happy to. And I think both points that you're making here are around, hey, how do we measure the effectiveness of this as we start to move into this ROI focused world? I always come back to kind of revenue per FTE from a sales perspective. If you think of a typical seller's week, if they're busy, maybe they're doing around a dozen prospect or customer facing calls in a week. That's probably about 24 hours worth of work when you figure prep time, follow-up time, and all of that. Figure another 8 or so hours a week of prospecting activity, which we know the great individual sellers are doing. They're out there prospecting today. And you put in 8 for administrative. I mean, that's a 40-hour week right there. And if you've been in a customer-facing role, like many of us are, right? 12 meetings a week, it's busy, but like that's sustainable. 20, you can do it, but man, some stuff falls by the wayside if you keep that pace going week after week, month over month. If we assume the CRM has great data, we've put great automations in place, well, that prep and follow-up maybe takes 5 minutes a piece. And if marketing is doing some of the great things that Meg was talking about before, I'm probably talking to folks that are already more highly qualified, and there's more of them. And I see this in a company, actually, I work with in the Insight portfolio. In a typical week, their AEs are having somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 customer-facing conversations. They're not burnt out. Those AEs are just operating in a more automated fashion where prep and follow-up takes a couple minutes. Things are personalized when they're coming to them. And like, what does this practically mean if we can get a deal or two extra from each one of our AEs? If we can improve productivity 25% from the same number of AEs, well, CAC likely goes down. If those AEs can consistently exceed their quotas, I mean, maybe the fundamentals of their compensation plan shifts a little bit. right? We've held quota to OTE ratios for my friends in ops and finance, like 5x as the gold standard for so long. If AEs can do twice the number of calls, maybe that needs to change. Now, I want to call something out. I'm not advocating for anybody here to go like blow their quotas up, triple the quotas, adjust capacity. I'm not saying that. My push to everybody here is just take a second and figure, if our AEs are doing X customer-facing calls on average, what does it take to get to 1.25X? What changes can I make in automation, enablement? What can I do from a process standpoint, from a targeting standpoint? Or what AI tools can I bring in to help them get there? Every company is going to be a little bit different. I don't think every company could get to 30 or 40 calls a week, but I think what we're seeing with a lot of the tools that are available, you can get another couple calls a week. You can improve productivity a little bit, which will then drive your revenue per FTE. Revenue will increase. The number of FTEs may stay the same. I do want to make sure we called that out as we're thinking through this ROI component.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, there's ROI just in terms of these productivity gains, the greater efficiency, the ability to do more with less, the tooling that folks are available. But, last year and the last couple of years, we really have talked about efficiency, which is, making that investment capital that companies have received last, extending runway, extending cash flow. And that really has driven, a greater focus on efficiency. And it's not just efficiency from AI, but also just general business judgment, business workflow, etc. So do either of you have, or any of you have a point of view around non-AI efficiencies to be gained as we think about, ROI as the acronym of the year?
I can jump in here real quick. There is a lot of talk about AI, and I would like to take us back to the basics, which is that more than ever now, with all of the AI generated noise and more coming, no brand can meet all customer expectations alone. And so partnering and ecosystem expansion will be a strategic superpower in 2025. And I want everyone to think beyond traditional channel partners. Think about finding partners who share the same ICP and have complementary value propositions, period. From there, figure out how you can drive joint go-to-markets and co-marketing with them. The power of this is that it gets back to that very simple formula. 1 + 1 = 3. And in the year of efficiency, partnering done right is inherently going to drive efficiency. It's going to reduce CAC because it's going to get your brand in front of more eyeballs. It's going to build trust more quickly, which in turn is going to build qualified deals faster, right? So think about building an ecosystem of partners around your brand. It's going to drive customer retention as well. And I think the 2025 success formula here is yes, AI, but also how do we do better together?
Love it. Super love it. And better together really implies human dynamics, human partnerships, human relationships. And so let's turn to prediction number 3, which is about human excellence. So, we're talking about all these agents, we're talking about AI doing more, but that really kind of requires the bar to be higher for humans. And so, our next prediction really is that human excellence will become even more important than ever before. So, Hillary, let's jump to you. What do we think about when we talk about human excellence?
Yeah. It sounds like an easy answer, but when human interaction occurs now in, let's just call it a selling process, it better be excellent for this reason. There's going to be an expectation and an assumption from a prospect or a buyer that you have seen their journey. You have seen what they have researched. You know everything about their company, their industry, their role, their problems, and that you're going to be able to deliver with the best answers. And more than that, but deliver as a human should. And there was a great question I know that popped up in the Q&A around how do you kind of manage that AI and authenticity? And that can be tricky, but this should really unlock our ability to go back to being that relationship side of interactions where it's empathetic, it's creative, it's curious, and it really is authentic, because it's table stakes to know now what's happening when, again, you are really interfacing with that prospect or customer. I was thinking about that in terms of this webinar. And I know I mentioned in the beginning, but I'm wondering how many folks are like, did they use ChatGPT, but did they just check it out with Claude before they jumped on? And the answer is a little bit. I really wanted to make sure, as leading a predictions webinar to a large audience of multiple different folks, that what we were sharing was going to resonate well. And that put an expectation that really differentiated it, I think, from prior webinars where you get to be the stated subject matter expert on something coming in. And so I think, again, it really is a positive expectation to not just require, but to expect that that excellence is going to happen because of what companies are putting into their AI plans that they have. Now, that also means that ad hoc that we talked about at the beginning, if you just have kind of rep by rep doing what they want to do to look better, you're going to fall flat as a company. It's where you really need to be focusing on that side of it. And it hits that note that we talked about, where culturally you can maybe move a little bit away from that fear that your role doesn't matter or it's not there, and you can augment it with, hey, go and be your own person when you're on the call and have that fun, because they know that you have the information that you need to help them get what they need. So it's not, I do want to kind of underline this. It's not just from AI. There still is this return from COVID. That was a shift that we saw from work from home to maybe hybrid to returning to office. And there's excitement around events that folks are having and being able to interact in person. And I'll be honest, I atrophied a little bit during that time. I got so used to being on Zoom and having those conversations and discussions. So it makes it, anytime you get to be on a Zoom or in person, an opportunity to really be bringing more of your creative, curious, authentic self. And again, I think the big piece here is that's going to be expected as we move forward, when there actually gets to be this human-to-human interaction.
Yeah, Rich, I know that you were nodding. Thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that an important call out here is person to person or human to human. When I chat with revenue leaders across the portfolio, in-person skills have atrophied. As a seller 15, 20 years ago, your ability to execute a cold call, your ability to sit down at a dinner and facilitate a conversation in a non-salesy way, those were table stakes. We've lost some of that needs to come back now, because to Hillary Headley's point, the bar is so much higher. You need to be excellent in that conversation and help your buyer along on their own buyer's journey. And I think that's another piece here that I would challenge folks to be mindful of. I think we got away with subjecting buyers to our sales process for a long time. I know a lot of folks on the call have bought software before. I'd be curious, and has anybody ever gotten excited when buying software that they became a stage 4 opportunity and got to see pricing? Like, no, that's insanity. And yet many folks subject buyers to that experience. We need to move into a world where, as a seller, my role is to enable a buyer to make a buying decision. That might not be me. I do that by building empathy, by building an authentic human connection, and being confidently curious. This is the stuff that great sellers have always done. But now all of our sellers need to do the things that great sellers have always done. And I think if you're not training and enabling your team to do these things and do these things well, you're going to be at a strong disadvantage in this current selling environment.
Yeah, if the seller, who's the agent, can get you 80% of the way there with effortlessly, effectively, that last 10 or 20% that the human has to do has to be that much more focused, capable, empathetic, relationship-driven, knowledgeable, etc. Meg, any thoughts on this topic? I mean, you talked a little bit previously about channels, tactics. Are there things that you're seeing emerge?
Yes, it's interesting because a lot of what we're talking about here is simply getting back to the basics. And there's 2 top of mind channels, and these are oldies but goodies, but I think extremely important and will only continue to become more important in this AI world. So the first is in-person events, and there was some discussion around events. As AI floods the market, digital interactions are going to be pushed to the side. People will continue to crave human connection. Think back to what Hillary Headley said around COVID. She was antsy to go out and be with people. This will continue to play out, and face-to-face events will be more valuable than ever. A little sub prediction here, and it's a little spicy, which is that I believe marketing as a whole will find new and unique ways to bring humans together. And maybe some of that will be virtual, but there will be new ways. Maybe there will be agents with you, whoever, whatever it is. And I believe that marketing itself as a function will become more directly customer facing. So a lot to unpack there. The second piece is around brand, right? And then again, brand is the, kind of the bedrock of any company's strategy. Because AI is creating so much noise and closing competitor gaps, your brand matters now more than ever. This is your number one moat. Your brand is also, which is pretty amazing, more measurable than it has ever been before, thanks to how generative search is reshaping decision making. So it's both speeding it up, it's also simplifying it for the buyer. So everything that the market is saying about your brand, through peer reviews to discussion forums to analysts, multiplies and compounds. That's both the good and the bad, right? So ensuring that you have a clear and aligned strategy around your brand and how you show up in the market is critical. And you actually, which is fun because we're combining the two here, can leverage AI to do that. So our team is talking a lot about MWOM. Sorry, it's another acronym, but MWOM stands for Modern Word of Mouth. And at its core, what this is leveraging AI to understand what all of the stakeholders that touch your brand, that play in your company's ecosystem, are saying about you, to get an always on pulse on the market, and then leverage those insights to continuously update your campaigns, ensure your messaging is cutting edge, ensure you're talking about the right ROI validation and the right proof points, and use the MWOM tool and the power of AI to differentiate your brand. And I think those two tactics and keeping those two tactics top of mind is what will differentiate the winners in 2025.
Super interesting. I want to pick up on something that you said, Hillary, which was that, after COVID, we've seen a much more fluid workforce, those who are in the office, those who work from home, those who are part-time. And that really kind of plays into our fourth and final prediction for this, which is the future workforce will be resourced across a spectrum of engagement. What do we mean by that? Or how do you think about that?
Yes, and it was funny when I was writing out the options, it almost sounds like a little bit of a song. You can be full-time, part-time, fractional, seasonal, offshore, nearshore, outsourced, crowdsourced, and then there's agents. Oh, and by the way, when I plugged it into ChatGPT, there were 20 other options for how they describe what a workforce is. That's not necessarily new to folks. I mean, I've worked in companies that have a real composition of what that is, but we think that that's really going to shift in 2025 and beyond. I'll give an example. There are some companies where there are power players. They are figuring out how to wield and use AI, Gen AI predictive, and they really are doing the work of 5 people. They might say to you, I don't need to be full-time anymore. I'll go contract. And they can contract with 4 other companies and do their job in 20 hours and be making 5x. We're seeing small sections of that happen where that is shifting a lot. We get a lot of questions just through an efficiency lens of how can we staff and structure this differently. And that's going to be important. We know that being profitable and being efficient in all those areas is key. Where it starts to get really interesting, though, is how you manage that. What does that look like, not only from like a CHRO people lens, through an ethics lens, through a legal lens, I mean, not to mention security, privacy, and compliance with all the data that might be shared and used in those different areas. I'm not an expert in that, but we know that those are some of the items that are coming to the companies with this dynamic workforce. I think another piece that really is changing this is we're still in a little bit of that power shift from COVID, which kind of swung the pendulum to employees to have the say of, I'm going to work from home, or I'm going to be hybrid and I won't return to office. It's swung a little bit in the past couple of years. And now there's this interesting shift again of, if I'm valuable enough, if I can do the work of multiple people and really show the impact that I'm having, I might actually step away from you entirely, go fractional, part of it, go contract, or in whatever kind of combination that we might see. I think the last one that is a really spicy one that we talked about in this area is this the year that you report to a robot? And we think that that might be a case in some of these areas with how fast we are seeing some of these agents and everything be moving forward. Now, it might not happen at every company, but are we going to see the first come through? Maybe there already is one. And if I got that wrong, I'll take the fall on that one. But we are really excited to see how this shifts. Again, not only for the composition of people that are at work, but also in the C-suite. Everybody loves to see a new C-suite title. We know that Chief AI Officer is out there. It's becoming more prominent. And there's follow-throughs on that with CDOs and CTOs and CHROs that actually are calling out that you need to be very strong at how to do AI, not only from an ethics, but from a technical and a strategic side of that, along with managing that through. So a little bit of a long answer, but there's some really exciting items here and how the workforce changes and really changes for the positive on all sides for both employers and employees to be creative and make sure that they have the most value and impact for what they're working on.
Yeah, because I really want to resource across that spectrum. I want to have the appropriate number of FTEs, folks in office, out of office, fractional, part-time, and I want to use agents as a resource as well. So in the future, I can envisage a world in which an AI agent is either my boss, but definitely an AI agent is my colleague, doing a separate set of functions all aligned behind a workflow where I'm engaged in some of it and the agent is engaged in other parts of it. So, Rich and Meg, I know you each have a point of view. Rich, just quickly, does this impact span of control? How do we think about that? And then Meg, maybe, how do we measure teams and headcounts if we have to change the measurements if there's an AI doing the job versus a human doing the job?
Yeah. And I mean, the short answer is yes, right? It's going to adjust span of control significantly. And you may be managing a mix of all of the above. You may have a few full-time employees, a few part-time employees, a few fractional employees. And in marketing, I know this comes up. I may have some agencies that I'm managing. I may have some agents that I'm managing. So it's going to depend a lot on the pace of change, the industry, and the company. But what I do see happening as well is my management of you will probably be more about your trade craft of what you're doing and a little bit less on some of the metric driven stuff. In sales, we see managing towards activity. I'll probably have an agent that helps me with that. So I'll be able to provide more coaching and development for you as a fractional, part-time, full-time, half-time, offshore, nearshore employee, whatever the right phrase for it is. But I do see span of control likely expanding and having more tools in place to have my management be more effective as a frontline leader.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm a big believer that bookings per FTE, both across new bookings and expansion bookings, will become a household metric. So we look at bookings per FTE a lot, but I think it is an area of measurement that will become commonplace in every go-to-market team, and that ratio will improve. AI is already doing this and will continue to maximize our go-to-market team's output with the same amount of resources. The other piece is we have access to more real-time insights. So we're able to continuously optimize the productivity of our teams. We're able to very quickly identify skill gaps in our teams. And hopefully we will be able to put a measure on how aligned we are cross-functionally and how that plays out in achieving those business level goals. So AI is going to help us drive smarter, more efficient resource allocation, and bookings per FTE is something that every go-to-market team will probably start looking at more frequently.
Yeah. Completely makes sense. And it's interesting to see how that's going to emerge. And I think our prediction, I like the words you all use, is spicy, but I do think that we have this spicy combination of offshoring, nearshoring, in-house, agentic, all the way to traditional FTEs where excellence really matters. We have a couple of minutes left, and I think we've responded to a lot of the questions that are coming up on the chat. So instead, I'm going to close with a couple of rapid fire questions for each of you. So the first being just sticking on the subject of AI, and I'll start with Meg, then Hillary, then Richard. If you could only do one thing AI related in 2025, what would that be?
Get started now. If you haven't started, begin today. The earlier, it's like riding a bike, right? The earlier you start, the more opportunity, and the ROI compounds, and it compounds quickly. More specifically, I would say as a go-to-market operator, continue to hone your subject matter expertise and combine that with being the best at leveraging AI. As a CEO or a hiring manager that's actively building out your team, look for both expertise and understanding of how they multiply that expertise through AI. And I think one of the things that is going to continue to bubble to the top is the softer skills. So we talked a lot about how the human touch will only become more valuable. Look for that human connection, look for those interpersonal skills when you're interviewing and vetting candidates for your team.
Yeah, mine's similar, maybe a little harsher. Get off AI island. You're all going to be using it. You have to be talking about it with other folks and learning from their mistakes and not making the same ones. And that can be really fun. We're doing a Gen AI recipe meeting tomorrow with some of our portfolio companies. We are experts. We're not the only folks using it, and connecting on AI is going to be as important, I think, as actually using it. So get off AI island, talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your colleagues, and find those communities to really make sure that we're building the best kind of vision forward for our generation and next generations to come.
Yeah, great points both. I'd like to bring us back to 7th grade science. Take a hypothesis-driven approach when you're using AI. Understand, and Meg said this, what was pre-AI? What do we think that this test will impact? How will we know whether or not our test or our experiment was successful? That's going to give you the biggest impact and allow you to be most effective with your explorations into artificial intelligence.
Love it, love it, love it. So let's quickly turn again, rapid fire. What's the one non-AI thing you would do in 2025? And we'll go backwards, starting with you, Rich.
I would focus on training and enabling your frontline managers to train and enable their people. They're not going to be managing by spreadsheet or dashboard anymore. They're going to need to talk to another human. And we know the stakes are high in that conversation. If you haven't set your frontline managers up for success to enable their teams, you're doing your whole business a disservice.
Yeah, I would tap into your renewed time and energy that you hopefully can get from AI. I had a great exchange with Claude last night on a tough topic, and it opened up like another hour of my night. So use AI to get back to your life and creatively look at problems or fun things that you want to do. I think it's the best way to be non-AI is to just tap into your time and energy to be creative. Meg?
I'll round us out with do fewer things better. The vast majority of companies, and maybe all humans, are trying to do too much. And the data actually shows in the marketing world that there's really only 4 channels that deliver the vast majority of marketing source pipeline. But most companies leverage over 11 channels to generate demand. So focus on efficient growth, focus on positive cash flow, and get surgical around what's actually driving value and what isn't.
Love it. Well, thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I think that there's been a ton of great insights. And so, Deanna, we will pass back to you.